Okay, hi 11. Just go through lesson 5 stuff with you then. So, as always, just pause the video when you need to, go back to your previous work and make any corrections needed or any additions. So task 1 was simply to watch this clip about Edwin Chadwick and Jon Snow and then, write a little bit about what they did to improve public health. So with Edwin Chadwick, he wrote a report, and although he made a mistake in saying that, human waste should go into the rivers, clean up the streets, but put the waste into the rivers. He was important because he was one of the first people to say, look, people who are poor and people who are dying of these terrible diseases, they're not poor because they're lazy or anything like that. It's just the conditions in which they live. So he didn't totally sympathize with the poor, but he was the first person to realize, actually, is it all their fault? And he was the first person to say, look, maybe government should be doing something. So he wrote that report. And eventually, after the cholera epidemics, the government thought, okay, maybe what he's saying we need to follow. Jon Snow was the first person to realise that cholera was spread through contaminated water. And he also wrote a report. And again, a bit like Edward Jenner, took people quite a long time to accept his findings, but eventually they were accepted and eventually caused a lot of change because people realised, look, we need to have clean drinking water for the population. Task 2, read the information below and answer the questions. Number 1, like I said in the video to talk about the instructions for this lesson, I did say this is a little bit of a trick question, okay? So the Public Health Act gave permission for local authorities to improve sewers, the water supply and street cleaning. And the Sanitary Act did the same thing as the Public Health Act, more or less. So why was this passed in 1866? Well, the answer is that this, comes down to the word permission. Okay, so if people in Cardiff wanted to set up a public health board, then they're allowed to, but they didn't have to. And that's the point. Okay, so there were, some towns, some villages, some cities, some authorities who just really didn't do anything, or they set up a board and then they just kind of ignored what the board was saying. Okay, so the Sanitary Act was passed in order to make sure that things were actually done. Okay, and that towns and cities did take, councils did take responsibility for the sewers and the water supply and everything like that. Question 2, the deserving poor. Well, remember what I was just saying about Edwin Chadwick then. People at the time thought if you were poor, it's because you were lazy and it was your fault. When, of course, really, it kind of depends a lot of the time in the circumstances in which you were born. Where you were born, what jobs your parents do. These things all kind of come into play in our lives today even. But even more so back then, if you were born working class back then, it was very, very, very difficult to get anywhere in life in terms of improving your situation, okay? So what some people said was, okay, well, this person's poor because, they've lost a leg. And therefore, it's not, they might be lazy, but they can't work anyway. Yeah. So that would be the deserving poor. People who were really old and unable to work, perhaps disabled, that would be deserving poor. How often did people wash? About once a week, I think it was. Even if you had a tin bath in the house, the amount of energy needed and the amount of water needed to clean yourself was just too much. Right, so how it helped improve public health. I tell you what, I won't go through all these because you really should be able to find the answers in here, okay? And also I've only got 50 seconds left, so for lesson 6, how effective was this attempt at improving public health? Have some reading here. Okay, so read through that. Number 1, watch this clip. Okay, it shows you a wash house from Liverpool in 1959, which is in the wrong place at the wrong time. But actually, there's a lot similar in 1959 in Liverpool to Cardiff in 1890s, okay? It gives you a good flavour. So have a watch of that. Task 2, put these in order, most important to least important in terms of changing things in Cardiff or the whole country. And in question 3, simply summarise in 5 points what you've read above, okay? So this is all leading towards exam practice here, 11. Best of luck with it. All right, cheers.